my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.
Are you ready to wake your inner goddess? This is Dr. Noah, 1/3 of your BYWG team. I have an exciting announcement. The full Getting to Goddess program is on summer sale for only $147. That's a savings of over $500. The direct link to save will be in the show notes. Enjoy the podcast. Hello and welcome back to Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer and I am your co-host. Today our guest is Elle Russ. Many of you know Dr. Mike and I are both Primal Blueprint certified. In turn, we've had many members of the Primal Blueprint team on our podcast, and it's Elle's turn today. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so glad to be here. Nice to know you're also a primal coach.
Yeah. I think one of the first in the top 200, I think, for me personally.
Nice. Yeah, I'm number 5, and I wanted to get number 1, but someone beat me to it.
All right, let me do your bio and we'll get started. Elle is a writer, coach, and host of the Primal Blueprint Podcast. She's a leading voice of thyroid health in the fast-growing Paleo, Primal, Ancestral Health Movements. Elle wrote the Paleo Thyroid Solution after consulting with over 24 endocrinologists, internal medicine specialists, and general practicing MDs, but her thyroid condition was only getting worse, and nothing from doctors resembled a solution or even hope. Exacerbated and desperate, Elle took control of her own health and resolved 2 severe bouts of hypothyroidism on her own, including an acute reverse T3 problem. Through a devoted paleo-primal lifestyle, intensive personal experimentation, and a radically modified approach to thyroid hormone replacement therapy, Elle went from fat, foggy, and fatigued to fit, focused, and full of life. Originally from downtown Chicago, Elle lives and plays in Malibu, California. You can learn more about her at www.elleruss.com. Before we begin, let me just say Elle Russ's website is great, and prior to this podcast, I did my research and listened to at least 4 of the other podcasts she did. So if you don't get enough information from us today, please go check out our website and check out the other interviews she did with other people that we've had on this podcast, like Rob Wolf and Dave Asprey and people like that. So Elle, now focused on you. How about your backstory for the audience? What brought you to where you are today and ultimately writing the Paleo Thyroid Solution?
So many different journeys to that point, but the one that really did it was, so you told my story about how I solved 2 severe bouts in a decade by myself. I literally was my own doctor. I dosed myself back to health. And, my friends and everyone was like, you should really write a book on this, because I kept running into people with thyroid problems and I'd look at their lab work and help them. And someone said, you should really write a book about this. And I was like, I don't know, like maybe someday. Because I was already a writer, but I just never thought about nonfiction or books or health. And after my second bout, and going through that with the reverse T3 situation, I really felt compelled to do something. But I still, again, was like, until I met Mark Sisson, and the author of the Primal Blueprint and, Keto Reset, and of course my publisher. So, when I met him and started working for him, I saw he and his wife and the way they operated, and they didn't look like they were living some stressful workout all the time life, but their bodies were better than mine, and they were like 20 plus years older than me. And I was like, well, that's kind of BS. I should probably figure that out. These guys are killing it, and they're 20 something years older than me. And so I read his book. I really got into it. And when I started to follow Paleo Primal, all of the connections came to the forefront, and it became a compulsion to write the book, not maybe someday, because I had finally dawned on the connection that no one had made between paleo, primal, ancestral, and thyroid, and really connecting all of the dots there. So that's sort of what it was. An accidental situation. A lot of times that happens. It's you follow your dreams, you pursue your goals, you just do what you love, and it leads to things that will give you more of that.
I can't agree more. Now, why is there so much confusion around this gland called the thyroid gland, from blood tests to natural treatments to pharmaceutical interventions. Why is this so?
It's really unfortunately because a lot of doctors, and too many, are uninformed. And you're like, well, what does that mean? They got an MD from Harvard, so how can they be uninformed? Well, they're steeped in 30, 40-year-old outdated protocols that they learned back in medical school that are no longer true or valid. So a lot of it's ego, unfortunately, which is really hard to hear when you're a patient and you realize someone's discounted you, and then you realize later it's because they didn't want to admit that they didn't know something. It's very tough. It's very, very tough because these people, we put our hands into our health into their hands, and which we shouldn't. We should be equal partners there. But, that's the mistake a lot of people make. We go to someone with a degree and we think they're going to do it. It would be akin to me, someone ripping on us for eating saturated fat and telling us we should stop eating red meat because it's going to cause heart disease. We now know saturated fat doesn't lead to clogging your arteries. Those studies and everything were debunked from 30 years ago. However, there are still doctors that will tell someone with high cholesterol, you need to stop eating meat and cheese and eat low fat. So again, how is that? How is that the case? So there are more informed doctors than others. And the ones that are more informed on this are usually functional medicine doctors, naturopathic doctors, and DOs. The ones that are really uninformed classically are endocrinologists. And that's a bummer because endocrinologists have the name endocrine in their name and should be an expert in all things endocrine system. But they're actually kind of oftentimes the worst doctors to go to because they are most trenched in outdated old thinking and ego. So unfortunately, it's just really a matter of the fact that doctors are uninformed and, using 30-year-old strategies.
I totally agree. The excuse that doctors are too busy and they don't have time to educate themselves any further than what they originally learned is just doesn't fly anymore in our society. We do have to take an active role in our health and our healthcare, without a doubt.
I know people who've been on thyroid hormones for 20 years. They still can't tell me how the thyroid works or what they take and what it does to their body. No clue. And by the way, if you're one of those people out there, woo! Get learned, people. Start to figure it out. You got to know what's going on. You just go, oh, I just take this pill every morning. Okay. Whew, you're going to run into some trouble. So it's better you learn now. You might even be able to optimize your health. There's a lot of people on thyroid hormones who are still not doing well and they have complaints, and then they're being treated over here for this or over here with the Prozac and this and that and the other. And they find out 20 years later could have all been fixed because they were never treated on the right amount or dosage of thyroid hormones because they were dealing with an uninformed doctor who didn't know what they were doing. And that day is a rough day. When you find out that you went through 2 miscarriages, psychological disorders, tons of pills, and 20 years go by, and then all of a sudden you're fixed because you met an informed doctor, and now you got to look back, it's tough. It's really tough because you want to blame, you're angry. Why didn't they know? They did this. I was sick for all these years. Yeah, but I would just ask, were you on board? Because I wasn't. That's why I was undiagnosed for a couple years and sick. Now, I'm not blaming the patient. I'm just saying, at the time, had I even Googled this stuff, I wouldn't have found it. So, but now in this day and age with podcasts and the internet and all this free information, listen, you can get there. You can, through perseverance, really find the answers without having to pay a dime.
Yeah, it's so much more than just taking a pill, like you said. And it seems like once you start investigating it, everybody has their own thyroid story as well, and I do too. And after listening to all your other podcasts, I understand the picture more. I had a very low iron, low ferritin levels, high homocysteine, a little bit of a T3, T4 conversion problem. And, just now in the last 6 months am I finally getting, low testosterone, low free testosterone, SHBG, I mean, all these things. And I'm just now after 6 months, well, a lot more than 6 months, but in the last 6 months, really finding the answers I need. So, it's amazing, and I hear it more now that I'm looking into it and searching it, and my reticular activating system is more attuned to it. It's rampant and all over the place.
Oh, that's the thing, is once you go down this road yourself as a patient or doctor or any other capacity, you will end up running into everybody has thyroid problems. It's, by the way, it's 200 million people plus worldwide. There are 60% of people undiagnosed, 23 million plus Americans at the very least take thyroid hormone, Synthroid, which is usually a non-optimal prescription, but the one everyone gives right away, especially endocrinologists. That one is the number one prescription in America. Okay. So, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. Now, with regards to your situation, I want to mention something. It's rare that ferritin, iron storage, is low in males because you guys don't menstruate. However, when you're hypothyroid and you can't hold on to certain nutrients, you can often become very deficient in that. Low ferritin will mess up everything from your testosterone to your thyroid. And also even, listen, I had a friend who had severe tinnitus and issues sleeping, and they had a combination of really low ferritin and DHEA, and everything was fine. Once they started to take some iron, get the ferritin up and get the DHEA up, boom, erections started happening in the morning. They were the appropriate age where they should have every morning, and they weren't, and their tinnitus in their ears went away. And I accidentally didn't realize, I looked it up, I didn't realize there was a connection between low ferritin and tinnitus. Again, you keep searching, you go down these roads, but it's important for men to get ferritin tested because often doctors might discount that in a male since you guys aren't menstruating. But still, it's important to thyroid health, and it's a really good thing you got that checked. And also too, so you can have low testosterone and then the doctor's treating you with testosterone, but they're never looking at the cause of low testosterone. And that's thyroid because, thyroid hormones are the producer and regulator of all of your sex hormones. You can't, so again, something falls from the top, it's a domino effect. And then doctors start patching it up on the outside, never really fixing the inside. And that's the goal, right? Is to get to the root.
Yeah, and it's scary, and I don't want to dive too much into my issues, but it's scary because I went to a very, very well-known functional medicine doctor in New York City, and we were not talking about the root cause. And I did take Cytomel for a little while, and it was not the right course of action at that time. And I would guess that he probably, do you remember just offhand, like what kind of dose of Cytomel he gave you? No, this was a year and a half ago. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's right.
I want to say very low, but anyway, enough about me. Can you give our audience, I don't know, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, like thyroid 101? What's free T3, T4, reverse T3, things like that?
Yeah. So for the people listening, by the way, I do have a free thyroid guide on my website, which has every blood test you need to take, where to find a doctor, all of the resources for finding a doctor in your state or your country, podcasts, everything. Okay. So you can just go to my website, download that, and you'll get all of the tests I'm going to mention here. But if, someone can write it down, we're really focused in the beginning on 6 tests that are going to give us a comprehensive picture. And again, these are the 6 minimal tests. You can do 100 million tests, right? Heavy metals, this, Lyme disease. Okay, there's a million things you can test for. But if you're just going to start out and try to see if there's an issue, you go with these. The basic 4 are TSH, free T3, free T4, and reverse T3. And then you always need to rule out Hashimotos, and there's 2 antibodies for that. One's called the TPO, which stands for thyroid peroxidase antibody, and the other is called thyroglobulin, or TGAB. And you need to get both tested because some people are positive for one and not the other. And so it's important to get both of those tested because you could, be negative for one and positive for the other. So that's important to rule out. Now, with regards to the first 4 tests, TSH, free T3, free T4, and reverse T3, those 4 can just tell you, I'm going to explain all of those and how this master gland and our brain and how this all works. And it'll seem confusing at first when I'm mentioning like free T3. These are just placeholders for something logically you'll be able to understand. So it starts with the pituitary, really, at the base of the brain and the back of your head, really. And it's kind of, you could just consider it a sensor. And it is when your body gets low in thyroid hormones, the pituitary will send a signal to the thyroid, like, yo, wake up, time to produce some thyroid hormones because she's getting low. And that signal is called the TSH, and it stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, it's not a thyroid hormone at all, okay? It's just the signal. So in a normal working person with no thyroid problems, this is how things should go. The body gets a little low in thyroid hormone. The pituitary goes, yo, 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 wake up, sends a TSH signal to the thyroid. If the thyroid's working right, it's going to dispense a larger percentage of T4, a little bit of T3. And then throughout the day, your body's going to convert that T4 into T3 as needed. And I need to explain that. I'm going to stop right there. So why is there, let me explain first of all that the only biologically active thyroid hormone that exists is called T3. Usually when people feel like crap and are hypothyroid, it's because they have low free T3. Free T3 is the test that really corresponds with how one's feeling. If it's too high, you're hyperthyroid, and if it's too low, you're hypo. Now, most people who are normal, blah, 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 using a standard American range of like 2.0 to 4.0 on a free T3 test, most normal people who don't take thyroid hormones are 3.1. You know, like they're the middle of the range. But we can't use that to assess people who are on taking exogenous hormones. Okay. But here's the thing about T4 and T3. T3 is so powerful. Okay. It's so powerful. If you Googled Cytomel right now, 100 bodybuilding websites will come up and you're like, what the F is going on? And it's because they jam themselves, bodybuilders, with T3 to burn as much fat as they possibly can before a competition, because it is really the only fat burning hormone in our body. I mean, there's other things that contribute to fat burning, but you cannot burn fat without proper T3 levels, period, end of story. You can't really live without it. If you don't have a thyroid gland, which rarely anyone's born without it, but let's say you had it removed and you didn't have your medication with you and you're on a stranded island, good luck. You're not going to last long. Okay. So this is critical to life. So T3 is so powerful. It sounds great. Like, oh yeah, why don't I just take a bunch of T3 to lose weight? Well, I'll explain that in a minute. But here's the thing. It's so powerful that we have this built-in sort of storage hormone called T4. And T4 is very steady, where T3 peaks and dissipates within 4 hours. It's pretty powerful. And in order to kind of control this powerful hormone, your body kind of does this wonderful little like slow release kind of mechanism, you can think of it, where, you know, as your body's designs need more T3, the T4 that was dispensed by your thyroid will convert into what you need. And whatever T4 was dispensed that day or week or whatever that's not being converted into the T3 will convert into reverse T3, which is an inactive form of T3. Why does it do that? T3 is so powerful. Like I just said, it's like throwing gasoline, you know, onto a fire. And so it's regulated by the storage hormone that kind of senses, okay, she needs some, now dial it back, go to reverse T3. Why would T4 ever convert into something that, quote, didn't matter? I mean, the inactive form. The reason is because reverse T3 is really a marker of wellness and unwellness in all human beings. And here's why, because it's the master gland, it's the master thyroid hormone T3. Let's say you're very stressed out and under eating. Okay. Let's say you're a marathon runner and you're on a, you know, low carb, low fat, bad paradigm and you're skinny and you don't have much body fat. There could be a scenario where your body's like, the primal perspective is, nope. We're going to downregulate this because she can't handle any more T3. She's not getting food. First of all, she's probably starving. So we need to hold on to these fat reserves. She doesn't have much body fat anyway. Meanwhile, we're going to do some other things. We're going to lower her sex drive. We're going to make sure she can't get pregnant, or if she does, she'll have a miscarriage. Now, I'm talking like the body's talking, but that's really what's happening because your body's trying to save you at every given moment of your life. And you have to remember that. So these things are in place to save your life. So let's say you get a horrible infection or you get into a car accident and your leg is severed. Oh my God. Well, in that case, your thyroid feedback loop, that's with the brain and the thyroid, is going to downregulate. It's going to go, inflammation, fever, flu, whatever. We're going to downregulate. We're not going to put too much T3 on this fire, and we're going to just convert it into some reverse T3 right now and dial it back. Now, problems happen when the messages are sent, either lifestyle, stress, lack of sleep, heavy metals, doesn't matter what's going on, that disrupts this conversion and says, we are not converting it into the thing that matters. And that's happening more and more. It's a very rare thing to have a reverse T3 problem, but it's becoming more and more prevalent, and less doctors understand and don't test for it, don't understand how to look at it. Basically, you just do a ratio between the free T3 and the reverse T3. It should be 20 or higher. 18, fine, you're all right. But I mean, mine was like 11. And when it's at that point, what's happening is the T4 is not converting into the thing that matters. It's converting into the inactive form. And then you just have T3 swimming around in your cells, swimming around in your blood, never kind of punching into work, never getting into the cells to do the job. So you can be hypothyroid to the max and be on thyroid hormone and not have a doctor even know it and say, you're fine. Your thyroid looks great. Because they're not testing the reverse T3. Most endocrinologists don't test anything but TSH and T4. Now that I've told you how important T3, all that matters is that conversion happens. So if you're not getting the thing that matters, who cares if you're testing the signal? The signal fluctuates throughout the day. You could just work out and then get a blood test. The signal of the TSH might look a little high to a doctor, and then they're concerned, but they're not looking at the other things that matter because they're using 30-year-old. The TSH test was developed in 1973. Okay. So, it's not something if you have a doctor that's gauging your thyroid status based on TSH and T4, you run, get out. Those are the people that suffer for 10 years, miscarriages, never get treated, told they're crazy, put on antidepressants, told they have this closet eating disorder. You're with the wrong doctor. They don't know what the F they're doing. Get out. If your doctor isn't testing the things I mentioned, you need to get to a new doctor ASAP or get it tested on your own because you're going down the wrong path. They won't even know how to dose you. Even if you have to go on thyroid hormones, they're going to do everything wrong because they don't know what they're doing. They're not testing the thing that matters. If all that matters is that we get the biologically active hormone and the proper amounts of it, then why are you testing the thing that converts from it? You can give someone all the Synthroid, which is T4 only. By the way, that's the original, medication. It's not the best, but it can work for some. So you can just give someone all the T4 thyroid hormone you want. Is it converting into the thing that matters? And if you're not looking at that, oof, good luck. Then it's just a crapshoot whether that patient's doing well or not. And that's where it comes, that's where patients go to the doctors, and their doctors make them think they're crazy. And it's really the doctor that's uninformed. So signals sent, if it's working right, you get some, maybe roughly, we don't totally know, but roughly 80% T4, 20% T3 is dispensed by your thyroid. And then throughout the day, your T4 is going to convert into T3 as you need it. If something goes wrong, you get a flu or you're stressed or, whatever it is, it might downregulate and kind of convert into some reverse T3 and be washed out of your system. This is a really elegant feedback loop. And so if something happens in that loop to disrupt it, you've got a problem. So you can have a conversion problem like you did, which was reverse T3, and like I do. It could be caused by heavy metals, Lyme's disease, Epstein-Barr fluctuations. There's a million, it's just stress, lack of sleep, mental stress. Any of these things that can produce a fight or flight or, cortisol surge are things that are going to conflict with the system. So the paleo primal lifestyle is right in line with thyroid because it's the ultimate in blood glucose management and the ultimate in adrenal management. And those things are critical to sex hormones and thyroid. Hopefully that made sense. I can clear up the feedback loop or give more detail if you'd like.
No, I think that's very, very clear to me, and you do it so it's amazing. When I listen to you do that, it's really, really amazing. Are there some key words or phrases if you're looking for a doctor to work with your thyroid? Is there anything that rings a bell positively, not necessarily negatively?
A doctor who's open to receiving some information. Let's say you bring in some research or an article. It's not that every doctor has the time to read every book a patient brings in, but someone who's open to learning or looking into something. I have in the past gone to doctors and they've just been like, I'm not going to read that. And I'm like, but this will teach you how to help me. And they won't. They just like, whatever. So, if you get discounted, if a doctor doesn't talk to you about symptoms and is only looking at lab work and just tells you, like this is what you need to do and take, that's a red flag because symptoms come into hand here. Doctors are too rigid about blood work. And especially if they're an endocrinologist and they want to see things a certain way, which can keep someone sick for a long time. So if someone's not open, the other thing too is on that free thyroid guide that I have a whole list of like, how do you even know if it's the right doctor? There's things you can do. You can call ahead of time, talk to the nurse. Hey, does this doctor routinely test free T3 and reverse T3 in patients? Does this doctor prescribe anything other than Synthroid? Do they have patients who are natural desiccated? Do they understand compounding T4, T3? Those doctors, do they prescribe T3 only in certain cases where it's valid? Those kind of questions are important to ask. Now, you don't need a doctor who might answer yes to all of them, but as far as the testing goes, you do. You do. Because usually doctors that test free T3 and reverse T3 understand the variables of hormone replacement options that endocrinologists do not. Endocrinologists are classically Synthroid Nazis. They only want to prescribe everyone T4 only. Now, let's look at that. Based on what I just told you about the feedback loop and told you about our own thyroids and how they work naturally when they're working well, our body doesn't solely rely on conversion alone. Our bodies do dispense some direct T3. So the idea of just giving someone T4 only as a replacement isn't endocrine mimicry anyway. Does that make sense? It's not even, it was like, here's what happened. 100 years ago, in the late 1800s, there was an English physician who just was a genius, and people were having goiters, huge, like ball size, thyroids and puffy and fat and all sorts of hypothyroid symptoms. And this guy extracted sheep thyroid gland and injected it into people, and it started to work. And he basically invented what became natural desiccated thyroid, which is a major and top thyroid hormone replacement. And it's basically desiccated pig thyroid gland, and it kind of comes in the ratios that our own thyroids dispense T4 and T3. In each pill, it has a little bit of both instead of just T4. What happened was in the 50s, drug companies could not patent desiccated thyroid, so then became the propaganda machine of discounting it and ripping on it. All these endocrinologists were sold this bill of goods that Synthroid was the one-stop shop and only medication for thyroid patients. And then all of these people were transferred onto it and started to get sicker after a while. It wasn't working for them. It wasn't until many years later that finally functional doctors and people, because of thyroid patients complaining and never getting better, it was the ones that are geeking out, that are excited about medicine. We talked about in the beginning, people that are interested in continuing to learn, that they're going, hold on a minute. I'm doing what everything in medical school told me to do, yet this patient's still complaining, and this patient, and I'm seeing this, and those are the people, the men and women who went beyond and said, what is happening here? There's more to this. And those people, along with patients, discovered that there's more testing that has to be done, and there's more to this picture. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, of course, it absolutely does. Now, Elle, your book is called The Paleo Thyroid Solution. Where does paleo, where does diet, where does nutrition, where does that fit in?
Well, let's start with one thing that we know for sure, which is, Hashimoto's is a form of hypothyroidism. So people go, I have Hashimoto's. Oh, I'm hypothyroid. Do you have Hashimoto's? People are kind of confused. It's kind of the same thing, except for the only difference is Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disorder that affects the thyroid, and that's where it's coming from. So what does that mean? So, for example, in type 1 diabetics who have to shoot insulin, not type 2, not the kind you get from eating a lifetime of donuts, the kind that you get from, your pancreas taps out and it's an autoimmune thing. In those situations, the immune system sees the pancreas as an invader, and so it starts attacking it. And so then the pancreas kind of dies and doesn't produce insulin anymore, and now that person needs to go on insulin. Okay. So the same thing kind of happens with Hashimoto's. It's an autoimmune disorder that affects the thyroid. The autoimmune system makes a mistake and sees the thyroid as an enemy, so it starts attacking it, and it will destroy it. Now, we know for sure that grains, particularly gluten, triggers the Hashimoto's antibodies. You can have antibodies at 600, 800, 300, doesn't matter where they are on the TPO or whatever scale. If you cut out grains and gluten, they can drop down to sometimes undetectable amounts or like down to 25 within range, which is way better. Now, if anyone's out there and they have Hashimoto's and they're treated on thyroid hormone and they're doing well and they feel really great, still you need to look into your antibody levels, because the one thing your doctor may not know is that there's something you can do about your antibodies. People don't realize you can reduce them. So even good doctors that are treating patients well on thyroid, like good functional doctors who know what they're doing, and the person's feeling good, but in the background, behind the scenes, they can't feel the rise and fall of those antibodies because they're on medication, and it's happening. Why do you want it to happen in the background? Because antibodies equal inflammation, equal begetting more autoimmune problems, more issues, sensitivities, allergies, cancers, etc. Women have a higher incidence of giving birth to autism spectrum disorder who have Hashimoto's. So your goal as a person with Hashimoto's is to not only get treated so that you're not hypothyroid anymore and you're living a good life, but it's also to get those antibodies down, get them down. So most doctors will just go, oh yeah, well, your antibodies at 300 because you have Hashimoto's, and they don't think anything about it. They don't think there's something bad about that because they don't know there's anything you can do. So right there, the grain-free life of Paleo Primal and the legume-free life, right, of Paleo Primal and the mostly dairy-free life of Paleo Primal is all eliminating inflammation and igniters of autoimmune issues. So that's one. All right, so we know that for sure with Hashimoto's. What's the other? Well, there's a couple aspects to this. So when you're hypothyroid, often people become insulin resistant, right? Type 2 diabetic even. Think about it. There's no fire to burn anything. You got no temperature. You're freezing all the time. Things aren't being processed. Liver's not processing fat the way it should. You're getting fatter and fatter. Your cholesterol panel's getting off. Everything's going wrong. It's just going down a bad hill. Now, how do I explain this? So in these scenarios where like your body's falling apart and you have no metabolism, then other diseases are going to show up that you otherwise wouldn't have gotten, right? So now you might have more issues to tackle. But one of the things about Paleo Primal, aside from cleaning out the diet part, yes, getting rid of the seed oils that are inflammatory and causing issue, gut disruptors like grains and other things like legumes. Why are those important? Because the state of your gut is related to thyroid and vice versa. And also too, being hypothyroid is a state of inflammation. And so you need to attack it from a couple of prongs. You can't just take thyroid medication and expect your life to be better, because you want those thyroid hormones to be processed, converted, and metabolized, right? Like I just told you, you can give someone all the Synthroid or T4 you want, but if their primordial baseline or if their body sucks or their cortisol's off, that thyroid might not be getting into the cells to affect the mitochondria and everything else in the proper way. So it's really important. Now, it's not just, yes, you're healthy, you're cleaning out your diet. Okay, there's that. Yes, let's get rid of the inflammation. We're going to help the whole system of the body. That seems real obvious. But what's not obvious to most is because people think that it might be a gimmick. Like, oh, I get it, the Paleo Thyroid Solution. You got hypothyroidism, you got fat, so now you do paleo to lose the weight. Okay, that's totally a part of it. But here's the thing. Paleo Primal is the ultimate in blood glucose management because it's going off of becoming a carbohydrate-dependent sugar burner and into a fat burner. And when you do that, blood glucose is steady. Why do you want that? Because when you have the ups and downs of a hypoglycemic who's a sugar burner who has to eat every 2-3 hours because you're not on the right paradigm, when those drops and rises happen, cortisol doesn't like that and it starts to shoot out. What is cortisol antagonistic to? Testosterone and everything else. So again, it's not just, yes, going paleo primal low carb will reverse your insulin resistance or type 2 that you got because you were thyroid for 10 years and hypothyroid and no one figured out. Yeah, for sure. But it's also not about that. It's about optimizing the body so that all the systems and the optimization of your sex hormones and everything that's related to thyroid is also on the right plane and in the same playing field. Does that ring right to you? I mean, do you feel, does that make sense? I just want to make sure I'm explaining right because there's, so again, it's a top down, but Paleo Primal provides the baseline for what the thyroid, blood glucose, cortisol, and adrenals need. Now, most hypothyroid people get adrenal fatigue. I had it twice. It's effing horrible to have adrenal fatigue. How do you know you have wonky, weird, low cortisol in the morning? Because it takes you 3 hours to get out of bed. I mean, not to get out of bed, but to get going. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you can't jump out of bed and be like, I'm ready, which, I mean, everyone wants to chill and maybe have a cup of coffee. I get it. But you know what I'm saying? If you're not feeling like my brain's on fire when you wake up, if it takes you a long time, there's probably some adrenal issues there. And if you're on a carbohydrate-dependent sugar-burning cycle, your adrenals are just going to get worse and worse. In fact, that paradigm can screw up your adrenals and then lead to thyroid issues. All of it can. Here's another thing about the gut that's important, aside from just the Hashimotos, people with grains, things like that, is usually people who are hypothyroid end up having gut issues and adrenal fatigue. The reason for the gut issues is, so you're hypothyroid, everything's slow, there's no fire on the, no logs on the fire. So now, as you eat, you're producing less hydrochloric acid. It's not breaking down the food and the nutrients, and then you can't absorb them. That's why men or women get low in ferritin, because your body can't hold onto iron despite how much liver you eat. And so, it's just, again, it's a cascade domino effect. And you've got to attack it from all of these levels. And it sounds complicated, but it's really not, particularly when you dial in the Paleo Primal. Now, I'm going to say this. If you're seriously hypothyroid right now and have not gotten it fixed yet, whether that's by means of a natural protocol, which is totally possible to reverse it naturally, or if you haven't got on thyroid hormone medication yet, either way, if you're still hypothyroid right now, going keto, or which I don't recommend for anyone who's seriously hypothyroid and hasn't fixed it and has suffered for a while. If you are grossly overweight, and that's kind of probably why you've got some thyroid issues, yes, then going extremely low carb could really help insulin sensitivity in the whole program. But here's the reason I say that things might not work like it would for a normal person going to primal paleo for starters. So if you're hypothyroid, you don't really have metabolism, period, end of story. So now you're trying to become a fat burner or to get into a state, let's say, of ketosis, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like it's like trying to light a wet log. So again, it's not that it won't work. It's just that people who are getting fat and you know, going in this direction, they're stressed out and they try every diet. And so they keep going and it's not working. I'm still getting fat, or I can't get fat adapted. I still have cravings. Yes, because if your adrenals are off because of your thyroid and your thyroid isn't fixed yet, it's then what you got nothing to work with. Do you know what I mean? So it's important that you're doing things simultaneously. And so what you can start to do is go down the paleo primal path of cleaning things out, readjusting the lifestyle, and you go down that path. You still might have sugar cravings. You still might be fighting it because, again, it's hard to have willpower when you have no free T3. Your body's craving energy. You don't have any of this biologically active thyroid hormone that is the thing that gives you mental and physical energy and metabolism. So what happens? Your adrenals take over, start overproducing cortisol. That's why you got the tire around your waist. And then they get tapped out because it's trying to look for energy somewhere. So now you're craving sugar. Because your adrenals are like, yo, wake up, we need to get her up. She got nothing over here with the thyroid. And then you're just craving energy, so your brain is even more addicted to sugar and carbs. So at first, there might be some willpower, extra willpower there with a thyroid patient who hasn't yet gotten optimized, but at least you can go down the path. I'd rather have someone overeat some fat and protein for a while or overeat some healthy food while they're getting fixed, because they still have cravings. Because once your T3 is in the right place, once you're not hypothyroid anymore, you really can get into the state of, you know, fat burning, and then the cravings and everything goes away. Then everything we talk about in paleo primal actually works. Does that all make sense?
Yeah. That was actually my next question for you is when you wrote this book, you know, paleo was essentially the #1 search diet word. Now it's keto. You know, how has that changed your perspective in this whole picture?
Run that by me again.
When you first wrote the book, paleo was probably the #1 search diet word if you Googled it, right? Paleo is #1. Now it's keto or ketogenic diet. How has that changed your perspective in this whole picture of treating and trying to manage the thyroid?
Well, it's not about a perspective as much as it's about fielding objections and false statements by people. Like keto causes thyroid problems, or do you know what I mean?
Right.
Or low carb paleo causes thyroid problems. No. There's so much to that. And I go into detail with this with Mark Sisson and Rob Wolf, and happy to do it here, but that's really not the case. I just told you a little bit a part of why that's a misguided conclusion. Okay, so there's a lot of people who are throwing some stuff out there that's not true. There is something to be said, though, like I just said, about if your adrenals and your blood sugar is off because you're still hypo, then again, you may need to follow a little bit. Like you may not be able to go as extremely low carb as you would be if you were fine and not hypo and fat adapted. So again, it's just you do your best with where you are, but to demonize keto or low carb and say that, you know, listen, a lot of times low carb can really help reverse a thyroid situation because, again, it's making you more insulin sensitive. Being pre-diabetic or insulin resistance is inflammation. And again, inflammation, you know, your body senses inflammation, it might downregulate, create more reverse T3. Don't give your body any messages it doesn't need to receive. You know what I'm saying? Don't be talking smack to it if you don't need to. And that comes in the form of so many. It could come in the form of not accepting a phone call from a toxic friend you used to know, or like just don't answer the phone call, because that can really, in a sensitive state, mess up your adrenals, you know. And some other symptoms of adrenal issues are just really not inability to multitask, being overwhelmed by small things, and a real sensitivity to light, sounds, and smells. Like can't handle music in a car. Neighbors upstairs, or like, and if you're in an apartment building, are all of a sudden you're just like, you hear everything and you're annoyed as hell where you never noticed it before. You've lived there for years. Not being able to wear any kind of scents or perfumes, or just can't deal with it. Like, your friend shows up with cologne and you're like, oh my God, like you just can't handle it. Those are big signs of adrenal insufficiency. Yeah. Aside from 3 hours to get going in the morning. Yeah.
So now, I mean, that's what makes your book so special is that uh, you look at your whole picture. I mean, you even talk about a little bit of acupuncture and chiropractic to open up channels to just to look at every avenue possible to manage your energy, to manage your cortisol, to manage your adrenals, to manage just inflammation, overall health, to look at the whole picture, which ultimately, and I think you would agree, is really what needs to be done. It's not a one key fits one little lock. It's an entire picture, and that's what the paleo primal / functional medicine movement really is. It's really a custom-made, designed plan that looks at all the factors and then looking at the cause of what's causing your problems.
Yeah, and like you said, you can go to one of the quote best functional doctors. Let me just say this. The best-selling thyroid books have been written by patients, not doctors, for a reason, right? Because we know what it's like. And the ones that are at the top, I only recommend 2 other thyroid books other than my own, because I would never recommend anything I don't believe in. And I've read all of them, by the way. So, and here's the other 2 that I love. Stop the Thyroid Madness by Janie Bowthorpe. And her website, Stop the Thyroid Madness, is the best website for thyroid health. I wouldn't even attempt to replicate it. You go there if you have any confusion about stuff. That's you're not going to get much on Paleo Primal over there, and the things we're talking about, but you're going to get some of the same information about tests and things like that. The other one is a book for people who have a reverse T3 problem and are really struggling with that. And this book saved my life, and written by a patient out of the UK. And I interviewed him a few weeks ago on our podcast. His name is Paul Robinson, and he wrote a book called Recovering with T3, My Journey from Hypothyroidism to Good Health Using the T3 Hormone. That book is only for people that need to go in the direction of being on T3 only, which I am on. That is the last choice of thyroid hormone replacement. So actually, to make this very clear to the audience. So why is it the last choice? So the optimal choice for most patients for medication is to be on a T4, T3 combination, such as Nature Thyroid Armor, Natural Desiccated, Canadians, IRFA, whatever, desiccated pig thyroid gland. The other is T4, T3 compounded. That would be the second. What does compounded mean? Sometimes there's fillers and there's some other subthyroid hormones that kind of innocuous called T1, T2 calcitonin that are in natural desiccated thyroid. Sometimes Hashimoto's patients, or if you're Jewish and opposed to eating pork, or you have some ethical issue because you're a vegan, etc., because of pork or animals, then you would do compounded T4, T3, which you have to get from a compounding pharmacist. And what they do is they basically take, T4 and T3, and they put it in the same ratios as you would get if you were taking natural desiccated. Okay, so those are the 2 options there. Those are the top option. Maybe the next one would be Synthroid, but T4 only, like we talked about, not necessarily the best choice. Then the last one is T3 only. And why is that? Well, now that we know about T4 and reverse T3, you kind of want that system working well, because I'm a human being and I can't gauge in my brain what my cells need at any given time. So to dose oneself with T3 only is kind of ignoring that whole feedback loop with the reverse T3. Why is T3 even a thing people do? Because if you have a reverse T3 situation that cannot be resolved, meaning most of your T4 is being converted into reverse T3, not the active T3, it's blocking your cells, you're remaining hypothyroid, T3 is just swimming around in your blood, and you're fatter and fatter and you're still hypo. The only thing that does not convert into reverse T3 is T3. It's the only thing. So if you take T3 directly, obviously you're bypassing that, but you don't want to. See what I mean? Because if someone's on full replacement for T3, I take half my thyroid's working, so I take a lower dose. But let's say you're on a full replacement dose of T3 as an individual. That means, okay, so let's say you get the flu. Let's say you get into that accident. Let's say something happens. That reverse T3 system's not there. You could overshoot or undershoot it at any given time because you're a human being. So you kind of have to factor that in. So like, for example, I'm on T3 right now. If for some, God forbid, reason I got like the flu tomorrow or some like kind of crazy infection, I might take a little less knowing what I know. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Because my body would be naturally kind of dialing it back anyway, right? But I can't gauge it because I don't have these diagnostics. We can't test this stuff. So again, you want this feedback loop. You want T4, T3. You want the conversion, and you want the stuff when it's not used to go throughout the reverse T3. And if you have an issue, it dials it back, right? So hopefully that makes sense. I know it's a lot. People can re-listen to this one. So T3 is the last choice, but thank God it's there, because I would be dead right now if T3 weren't an option. And if you can't separate the hormones in desiccated thyroid. That's why compounded, going back to compounded, you can compound it kind of to the microgram. And there are people that can sense like a difference of 2 or 3 micrograms, which is very little. But if you're one of those people, then you want it cultured to you. And the way to do that is through compounded. But for the most part, natural desiccated thyroid is a pretty great one-stop shop for most people. It does the job a lot of times. You can also take natural desiccated thyroid and then add a little T3 or add a little T4. There's always ways to adjust this stuff. T3 only, again, is really the last resort option when you have tried everything to resolve a reverse T3 issue and have been unable to do so, which was my case. So, and then I later found out I had heavy metals and other things that contribute to reverse T3. So if anyone has silver fillings in their mouth, get them replaced or get the heavy metals test, because that could be a part of mitochondrial dysfunction and inability to lose weight on top of thyroid effery.
Yep. And like I said, right from the beginning of this interview, get the book. We'll have all the links for the book. Go to Elle's website, look at the other podcast, listen to this one again, listen to all the other podcasts so you can understand more, because the information is there. It's readily acceptable. My final question for you, Elle, and I asked this the last 30 or 40 interviews I did. What's your rhythm, from waking up to sleeping every day? Your rhythm, your routine. How does your day look like?
Well, I wake up, bust open a brand new bottle of Jack Daniels. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. That's not like, wait a minute. No, I'm pretty routine. I like to wake up early, go to bed early. Sometimes in the summer I'll stay up later or sleep later. It just depends on the season. When I wake up, I like to chill for a while. I like to have some coffee or, hang out. I usually intermittent fast, meaning I usually don't eat from waking up until about noon or 1. However, if I do, it's in the form of something like half an avocado with salt, or a spoonful of coconut butter, or a cup of bone broth with butter, or a cup of bone broth with collagen, something like that. Because I usually end up going and exercising in the first half of the day. And I've never been a big breakfast eater, never been really hungry in the morning. And once you get fat adapted, and go down this train, often people realize they're not hungry in the morning anymore. So I'm just not really hungry. And then I usually have a 4 to 6 hour eating window, meaning so I will eat kind of whatever I want in between 12 and 5, 1 and 6. And again, I'm not like religious about it. It's like, if I want to eat something past that time, I will. It's just that really works well for me. So yeah. And then, so I do exercise daily. There are times when I don't feel like it and I don't, but it's rare. I think it's really important to get sun and be outside, which I do a lot of. I also like the gym and I do weights and stuff like that. And I swim, but I do a lot of hiking in California. And then, I mean, sometimes I'm in bed at 9, sometimes it's 10:30. It would be rare if it were later than that, but it happens. I don't like that when that happens, when I'm out really late and you get home at 12 or 1 o'clock. It really disrupts sleep and screws up my next day. So I'm really, the importance of sleep is huge in my life. If I don't really feel right if I get less than 8 hours. I really try to shoot for a minimum of that. And it's really important for the repair, especially myself being athletic too. And it's just important for everything, your liver, thyroid function, stress. So sleep, I cannot impart enough, because so many people, I'm so tired. I'm like, well, what time do you go to bed? 12. What time do you wake up? 6. And I'm like, well, you know what? That's on you, man. If you've made it past 21 years old, figure it out. Be on time and prioritize sleep. If people are past a certain age, I'll give a 21-year-old even some breaks. But if you're past a certain age and you're late all the time, I just look at that person and go, you got to be effing kidding me. Get it together, people. How long have you lived in this world where you know how long things take? Get it together. Same thing with stop complaining about stuff that you're not doing anything about. It goes for me too. I'm open to anyone calling me on my shit there, but it really is. It's everything. Stop complaining. Whatever you're complaining about, get up and start to, because you know what? It's like you ask those people, would you like to feel rested? Yeah, I would. Great. Well, it doesn't sound like you really want it, or you'd be doing something about it, period. And that goes for everything, right? So there are days I don't want to work out. There's sometimes weeks where every day it's like, oh God, No. And it's not because I'm run down and I shouldn't work out. It's just because whatever, I'm being mentally lazy, it's glooming out, whatever whatever it is, but I do it anyway. And, I make that commitment to myself. And every time I never regret it.
Well, that's all for me. I like I said, it was a wonderful interview. The links to your book will be in our show notes. This podcast will probably come out in July. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer. Thank you so much, Elle. You are listening to the Beyond Your Wildest.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. If you like what you've heard today, please share this to your friends and family, and you could sign up for our incredible weekly email at www.beyondyourwildestgenes.com. Thank you, and as my oldest son Hayden says, be awesome and never unawesome. Thanks again, Elle.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye. You too.
One, two, three, four, get my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.